I'm 29 and hopelessly in love with my 23-year-old best friend who insists, my feelings for you will always be platonic. After V's toxic emotional abuse left me broken, he stood by me when I needed it most. Now I'm torn between wanting him close and moving on. How do I do it? This will likely be a lengthy and quite disorganized narrative. I will probably delete this soon, but I need assistance. I feel the necessity to provide sufficient background information to clarify why I cannot view this situation in strictly black and white terms, as well as to explain my confusion. I am a 29-year-old male in love with my best friend who is 23 years old and also male. We met at university, where I am among the older students in our class. Initially, I thought he was around my age because he was physically larger and sported a lovely mustache. His serious and reserved demeanor further contributed to the impression of him being older. Our friendship began in a typical manner. We shared several classes since we were in the same program. Then one day, we discovered that we were also neighbors, which led us to start hanging out at either my place or his on a weekly basis. I found him attractive from the very beginning, but at that time I was not thinking of him in a romantic way because I was involved in a situationship with a closeted guy. My focus was primarily on that. Nevertheless, I was curious if he had an interest in guys as well. He was difficult to read and took a long time to open up, but certain behaviors made me wonder. For instance, while we were watching movies, he would gradually lean against me. One day, he invited me to help him choose a perfume. When we arrived at the store, the staff provided us with 2 paper strips to test various fragrances. Instead, he sprayed the perfume on his wrist and offered his hand for me to smell to see if I liked it. I did, and he purchased it. The guy I was involved with at the time was also a classmate and a close friend, so we attended all the first-year student events together. I was always with him, while my friend was with his own social group. At times, I sensed a subtle possessiveness from him toward me. Yet I sometimes wondered if it was merely wishful thinking, a feeling that my instincts affirmed. For example, I would sit and converse with the guy I was involved with, and my friend would occasionally step out of his group to check on me, asking questions like, "I am going to the store, do you need anything?" Or, "I am going home, would you like to come with me or will you come later with him?" He would even suggest going to the sauna, saying, "I will go if you go too, I do not want to go alone." On one occasion, while I was sitting on a couch with the guy I was involved with, let's call him V from now on, he came out of his group and sat down next to me, making a motion to put his hand behind me but stopping himself before tucking them away instead. Incidents like these made me curious. During various times, I attempted to discern if he liked guys too. He already knew I was gay by asking indirect questions. However, he skillfully provided vague answers to avoid directly addressing my inquiries. For instance, while we were watching a movie, he asked me, "Do you find that actor attractive?" I replied, "Not really my type." "Why do you?" He responded, "I like the Scottish accent. I think it's funny," evading the actual inquiry. Now let me share a bit about my situationship with V as it is relevant. It was incredibly toxic. He was manipulative, narcissistic, selfish, a habitual liar, and an altogether awful person. Initially, he claimed to be straight, but as soon as he learned that I was gay, he began flirting with me incessantly, providing a great deal of attention as if he were my boyfriend. One day, he revealed that he was actually bisexual. He maintained this narrative for about 2 months until he suddenly reversed course and claimed he was just joking. He was actually straight. That relationship was characterized by intense fluctuations, hot and cold, and kept me perpetually anxious. I went out of my way to spend time with him while he did as he pleased. Eventually, I realized that he was using me to boost his ego, relishing the attention. Ultimately, I had no choice but to cut him out of my life. By that time, I was completely mentally broken and experiencing suicidal thoughts. I had become extremely distrustful and insecure, something that, while not new, had certainly been exacerbated by my experiences with V. He effectively obliterated whatever self-worth I had left. The day I severed ties with V, I needed to speak with someone desperately. I felt as if I would suffocate if I didn't. I texted my friend asking, "Do you have some time for me? I really need to talk to someone." He promptly responded, "Of course, come over." I went to his place and shared everything about V's emotional abuse, manipulation, lies, all of it. This was the first time my friend learned the true nature of my relationship with V. Before this, he believed we were just very close friends. I explained how V constantly lied about his sexuality, switching from saying he was gay or bisexual one moment to claiming he was only joking the next. As I recounted all of this, my friend suddenly exclaimed, "Forget this, I am bisexual." I was momentarily taken aback because I had not anticipated him coming out to me. I said, "Oh." He continued, "Yes, but I know that you want true love, a real long-term relationship. I am not in that phase of my life yet, so I will just set a boundary." After this moment, he fell silent again and encouraged me to continue. I did, and he listened attentively, offering support, assuring me that if I ever needed to talk further, he would always be there for me, and he still is. To this day, I wonder why he chose to come out to me at that moment, as it felt like an impulsive decision. In the subsequent days, weeks, and months, he listened to me weep over that guy, providing comfort and support, saying, I am always here for you. Because of him, I believe I was finally able to move on completely from V. Otherwise, I am uncertain how else I would have managed. We took a trip to a neighboring country for a few days. It was a delightful 3 days. One evening, we visited a bar for cocktails. After chatting and drinking for a while, I found myself flirting with him. He awkwardly replied, You are not really my type. That stung, of course, and I fell silent for a moment. He asked, Did I hurt you? I said, No, it's all right. He continued, You know, when you become friends with someone, you think if they wanted to take it further, you would be interested. I just never felt that with you. There was never any spark. I reflected on all the instances where I thought perhaps he had shown some interest in me and considered whether I had misunderstood all those signals. Here is some background information. He is bisexual but has never had sexual relations with anyone. He had kissed a girl once but nothing beyond that. He mentioned having had a crush on a childhood male friend back in his home country but never acted on it. He is not on any dating apps either. He once disclosed that he had insecurities about his attractiveness and a fear of putting his face on dating apps, although I could not fathom why since I find him very handsome. He stated that he was not ready for a long-term relationship at this point in his life, expressing that he was only interested in a casual sexual relationship. There were several individuals from the university, both male and female, who had flirted with him a few times. However, when he realized they were seeking something romantic and long-term, he retreated. He stated, I am not a romantic. Yet despite him telling me that I was not his type, I found myself falling for him regardless. His calm and steady presence offered me a level of comfort I do not recall experiencing before. However, these developing feelings reignited all the trauma that V had left me with not long ago. I began to feel paranoid, obsessive, terrified, distrustful, and highly insecure. If he ever seemed to neglect or ignore me in any manner, even if always unintentionally, I would withdraw into myself, convinced that this would become a repetition of my previous experience. Despite the fact that my friend never led me on or gave me false hopes, unlike V, I was concocting all the worst-case scenarios in my mind, driving myself to madness. Hence, the comfort I had felt was quickly usurped by anxiety, insecurity, and fear. I found myself dissecting every single action he took, searching for indications of when he might abandon me as well. I overthought situations to an extreme degree. One day, following one of such mental breakdowns, I realized that perhaps I was not suitable for such a close friendship at this moment and entertained the idea of cutting him off. It did not seem fair to burden him with my turmoil through no fault of his own, and I doubted my ability to manage it. I invited him over one evening and attempted to explain myself. I was a mess at the time and he noticed. He said, I value our friendship very highly and I like how close we are. I want us to stay close friends. I wish to be friends not only when you are at your best but also when you are at your worst. I confessed that I had difficulty trusting him and feeling secure in our relationship. He replied, then we will take it one step at a time and build that trust. I wish I could say that after such beautiful words, I felt suddenly secure in our friendship and everything was perfect. However, that was not the case. The following months were a nightmare, largely due to my own actions. I was experiencing nearly daily breakdowns, lashing out at him, questioning everything he said and did. I cannot imagine how exhausting it must have been for him to deal with that daily. Yet as always, he quietly and steadfastly supported me, reassuring me each time. If I mentioned that certain actions on his part would alleviate some of my fears, he would do his best to comply. However, every time I made a request, I would end it with, sorry, you do not have to do it, because I feared he might become frustrated with me. Yet he would respond, you do not have to say sorry. I would not do it if I did not want to. I did not make things easy for him. I was toxic for most of the time, likely attempting to push him away before he could abandon me. I continuously waited for the other shoe to drop and found myself questioning why he had not left yet. Am I truly worth all this hassle, I thought. He has other friends who are mentally stable and are not subjecting him to this exhausting trial on a daily basis. I asked him, wouldn't it be much easier for you if you just let go? He replied, it is a lot more painful for me that way and for you. After another one of my breakdowns, I asked him, are you angry? He responded, I am not angry. I am just tired and sad. You are jumping between extremes. I just want you to feel stable and safe. I have witnessed glimpses of you being happy, comfortable, and dare I say it safe, but then it slips back into sadness and anxiety and it hurts. The more he expressed sentiments like this, the deeper I fell for him. I could not help it because, in my entire life, I do not believe anyone has seen the worst in me and declared, I am even more certain about you now. So if you are trying to make me reconsider our friendship, it is not going to work. I am not leaving you. So one day I told him that I was in love with him. He replied, my feelings for you will always be platonic. He then requested an hour to respond properly. That night I went to bed early, devastated, even though I had anticipated this response. An hour later, my phone vibrated incessantly with his messages. The following morning, when I opened his messages, I discovered he had sent a series of long essays. I could see how much he had opened his heart in those messages. even though it was not what I wanted to hear. Particularly coming from such a stoic individual who rarely expresses himself, I understood how significant it was that I was likely one of the very few persons to witness this side of him. He expressed how much he cared about me and that he was committed to ensuring I would feel safe and secure in our friendship. However, he would never be able to reciprocate the romantic love that I desired. He acknowledged my feelings for him and expressed his willingness to navigate them until the day I finally moved on, establishing that our relationship would remain platonic. In those messages, however, he avoided using the word love, even when he articulated how much I meant to him and the care he held for me. Despite such a clear and definitive rejection, my heart refused to surrender. No matter how hard I tried to accept that he would never love me romantically, I simply could not. I continuously contemplated everything he said and did, questioning how all of it could possibly remain platonic, especially for a guy I had met barely 2 years prior. I reflected on the occasions when V's name arose and the kind of physical reaction it evoked in him. He would grimace as if he could hardly tolerate my mentioning it, unless of course I was disparaging V, which seemed to delight him. He detested V even though they had only spoken once. He once stated, "I do not even want to be in the same space as him." One day, while we were walking through the park, I casually asked, "Do you know what happened with V in class today?" He halted abruptly, his expression hardening. "What happened?" I was somewhat taken aback by his reaction. I asked, "Why are you stopping?" He responded, "You are going to tell me what happened now or I am not moving." He attempted to laugh and make light of the situation, but I could sense he was grappling with something. I said, "It's just that he looked really terrible and seems to be going through something." He calmed down, replying, "Well, that's unfortunate, but it's not your problem." We resumed walking. Or consider how he can read me like a book. It is uncanny how he can look at me and instantly ascertain how I am feeling, sometimes even through text. It often feels as if I can never conceal my emotions from him because he simply knows. He would then reassure me without me even needing to ask if he sensed that I was becoming anxious about something. He once said, "Even if we are not constantly communicating, my love for you will not cease." That was the first time he verbally expressed the word love. I understand he meant it in a platonic sense, but still, my heart seized upon it, and much of the insecurity I felt regarding our relationship diminished considerably. Then there are the instances when he expressed admiration for my hair. I used to maintain a very short hairstyle. Once, when I allowed it to grow a bit, he awkwardly suggested, "Maybe you should let it grow instead of cutting it. It is really nice and curly." I decided to let it grow, and frankly, I loved how it turned out, leading me to keep it that way. However, should I ever mention trimming my hair, he would insist, "It would be so strange if you cut your hair short again. Long hair suits you much better." I could tell from his tone that he truly did not want me to shorten my hair. Typically, he avoided complimenting my appearance, but from time to time, he would seem to momentarily forget himself and express, "You have really nice hair and I like your stubble. It really suits you," before awkwardly falling silent and avoiding making eye contact. Fast forward to the evening, I finally resolved that I truly needed to move on from my feelings for him. My friend has a tendency to go above and beyond to make up for anything he did that upset me even slightly. For example, once while we were working on a project, sitting side by side, my leg accidentally brushed against his. He asked, "Why are you making physical contact?" I moved my leg but asked, "Did it bother you?" He replied, "No. However, it is distracting me from focusing on the project right now." That night, when he came over to my place for our movie night, he leaned heavily against me, seemingly attempting to atone for his previous reaction. Something similar occurred that evening as we discussed his emotional vulnerability. I mentioned how slowly he opened up. He responded, "I have never opened up to anyone as I have to you." We discussed how jealous I become whenever I learn that other guys are flirting with him. Remarked, "You always get really angry." He then shared more accounts of different guys flirting with him, recounting how some friends from back home would sit on his lap during bench press workouts at the gym or how they had seen him naked in the gym shower. Granted, these incidents occurred before we met and were rather innocuous, yet being me, I found that it did not hurt any less. I brought up the friend he previously mentioned having a crush on, asking, "Do you still have feelings for him?" He replied, "What I consider to be feelings is significantly weaker than what you define as having feelings." I inquired, "If he wanted you now, would you go for it?" He responded, "Do you want the truth?" I answered, "Yes." He replied, "We would be friends with benefits." That statement felt like a knife through my heart, and I knew he noticed the pain it caused. I asked, "What about a relationship?" He answered, "No." I reminded him, "You told me that day that you would never, ever be with me. Yet today you say if that friend were to ask, you would." He responded, "It is not the same. Would you be happy with just hookups?" I replied, "No, I do not think I would. I am a romantic. That is an essential part of who I am. I am not a romantic. I do not think about settling down and growing old together. I am only 23. I want to explore more. I do not yet know what I want." He indicated that those friends would not care if he discussed flirting with other people because there were no feelings involved. They would just find it amusing. We attempted to return to watching the show we had been viewing, but he could see that I was visibly distressed. I was in pain. He asked, "Do you want me to leave so you can process everything I said?" I remained silent. He continued, "Maybe this will help you stop being in love with me and transition our relationship to a platonic one." I stated, "You definitively told me you would never feel anything for me." He replied, "When we first met, I considered engaging in a casual sexual relationship with you. However, as I got to know you better, I definitively decided that I do not want to be in any sort of sexual relationship with you. Pursuing hookups with someone seeking true love is a recipe for disaster." I recalled when he mentioned that he had never felt a spark between us or never considered anything romantic with me. I asked, "Are you sharing this to make me feel better?" He replied, "No, it is the truth." I questioned, "Why would you even consider that if I am not your type?" He fell silent. Then he said, "You are my emotional type. That is why we are such good friends." I told him, "You are mistaken about yourself. You are correct about most things, but not always." He smiled and said, "That is unfortunate. I enjoy being right." I stated, "The way you have stood by me consistently, how you stubbornly refused to give up, and how you appreciated spending time with me despite my flaws, that is romantic. It is not solely about growing old together." He hesitated the first time I noticed him lacking confidence in his argument. He quietly responded, "You think romance is about domestic life and growing old together." I replied, "That is the ultimate goal, true, but it is not my concept of romance." He fell silent again. I asked, "What are your ambitions then?" I expected him to mention a career or something comparable. Instead, he said, "If I tell you, we will never discuss this again." I replied, "Okay." He declared, "I just want evenings where I do not want to end it all." That was the final straw. Overwhelmed by the emotional weight of the evening, I began to cry. He said, "No, no. Do not do that. I would never do it." I had always perceived him as a composed and wise individual, perpetually in control. I was astonished to realize the amount of pain he was concealing behind his stoic facade. I also recognized that I was the only one he had confided this in. After a period of silence, he finally gathered his belongings. We stood before my door. I asserted, "You will change, you know. My instinct about people is not wrong. You will change." He cautioned, "Do not give yourself false hope." I asserted, "I am furious with you for sharing that about your friend, and I feel like punching you." He chuckled softly. "Most people in your position would not reveal that information. However, I appreciate the honesty." I retorted, "Yes, now get out." He smiled, leaning against the fridge instead. He softly stated, "We are trapped in this emotional limbo because both of us are too stubborn to concede." I remained silent. He continued, "But we have a bond. I do not believe it will ever fade." I affirmed, "Yes." As he turned to leave, he glanced back at me. We stared at each other quietly for several moments, and I might have imagined it, but for a fleeting instant, I thought he wanted to kiss me. Ultimately, he turned and said, "It has been a long day. Rest up." I do not believe there is any possibility of him ever loving me in the manner I wish for. Therefore, I now seek to move on from these feelings for him, reconfiguring my affection to align with the incredible friend he is. However, I am reluctant to create any distance between us to achieve this because it would hurt him as much as it would me. I simply do not know how to proceed. Summary: I am in love with my best friend. Both of us are male. I am gay and he is bisexual. He has supported me during some profoundly challenging times in my life, remaining by my side even when I was incredibly difficult to be around. I confessed my feelings for him and he expressed his love for me, albeit not in the same way. Now I want to move on from my feelings for him without distancing our friendship. Story 2. After 3 years of betrayal, my ex-GF returned pleading, "You were the only one who cared." But I told her, "I'm not taking you back." Months after she ghosted me, I learned she was pregnant with another man's child. I gave her 100 but sent her away in tears. What made her think I'd forget? This incident occurred years ago, and I thought it would be worth sharing. My former girlfriend and I had what could be described as an average relationship. We experienced our ups and downs, but we always managed to resolve our issues. I noticed that she began acting oddly and being secretive. I inquired if everything was all right and she snapped at me. She was also feeling unwell. Her daughter informed me that she was vomiting. One day I sent her a message but she never replied. I called her but there was no answer. This was not unusual for her. However, the next day I still had not heard anything from her. This silence continued for a week. I went to her home but she was not there and would not answer the door. She completely cut off communication with me. I texted her asking if I had done something wrong. I could see she had read my messages, but she did not respond. Knowing she was a religious person, I texted her, "I apologize for whatever I did, even Jesus forgave Judas." She eventually replied saying, "God forgives all," and included something that I cannot recall. She then instructed me never to text her again and subsequently blocked me from all platforms. I was devastated. It took me several weeks to process this situation. Then, about 3 months later, by chance, I was dropping off a patient at the hospice facility where she worked. I did not see her SUV in the parking lot, so I assumed she was not there. While talking to a nurse, she recognized me and asked how my ex was doing. I informed her that we had broken up, and the nurse revealed that my ex had been terminated for damaging one of the company vehicles. Then she delivered the shocking news. She asked if I would take care of the baby when it was born. I found out that she was pregnant, and if I recall correctly, she was 5 months along. It was also important to note that the child was not mine since I had undergone a vasectomy after my daughter was born. I felt my stomach drop at that revelation. It took me some time, but I eventually moved on with my life and started dating a registered nurse I met at the hospital. It has been about a year and a half since those events happened. Then, out of the blue, I began receiving texts from an unknown number. They were all about forgiveness and wishing me well in life, but I did not respond. One day, as I was finishing my shift at the fire department, I discovered a note on my truck, and it was from my ex. She was asking me to please meet with her, but after some consideration, I decided against it, primarily because she had cheated on me. My father taught me that if the person you loved and dedicated your life to does that to you, then they are not worth having in your life. I blocked her number shortly after that. Few days later, I returned home and she was there waiting for me. I ignored her and continued walking, which prompted her to create a scene. I confronted her, asking, "What do you want?" She expressed her regret. She mentioned that the father of her daughter had returned to her life and that she wanted to be with him again, but she did not know how to tell me. He had gotten her pregnant and then left her once again. She sought my help because she could not afford her bills and support her 2 daughters. I felt indifferent about the entire situation. I was angry at her for what she had done, but I felt sympathy for her daughters. I cared deeply for her oldest daughter, so I made a decision. I handed her $100 and told her to buy food for them, advising her to swallow your pride and move back in with your mother. Her relationship with her mother was very rocky, but she knew she was always welcome there. She begged me to take her back, claiming I was the only boyfriend who had treated her with care despite our ups and downs. I told her that I was not going to take her back and that I would not continue this conversation. I asked her to leave and she departed in tears. I felt genuinely bad, but I believed it was necessary. I later heard that she did move back in with her mother. The last I heard of her was that she obtained her teaching license and is now teaching at an elementary school. I am happy with my current girlfriend, and we have actually been discussing marriage.